What's up YouTube, Jay Traveling here. Today I have W1gsplitter's build that we're going to actually put together today. So I went through the parts in another video, so I'm not going to go through them again, but we're going to get this together. And the only difference is I do have the case out of the box, just for now to help with getting it all set up. So I'm going to move some of the parts out of the way just to give me some space to work and pretty much get this thing pieced together for him. So I should be able to get the motherboard, the M.2 and cooler onto the rig. Now I never used this cooler before, so I'll have to unbox it and see. It should just go together pretty similar to any of the other coolers that I've done. So let's get some of this stuff out of the way and onto the ground, just so it's easily accessible for me and I can do it. Now I do have my Phillips head screwdriver, my precision set, and I have my Husky knife just in case I need it for things like this. Slicing it open. Now anyone that's opened a motherboard box before, I mean, it comes pretty well packaged, so a lot of the stuff in here I will not need. Since I'm running an M.2, I won't need the SATA cables and things like that. Now, I do like to build just the motherboard and everything right on top of the box, and I'll put the CPU in it, the cooler, the RAM, everything just onto the motherboard before I put it into the PC. Now, you can put the motherboard in and then install all that stuff, but it just makes it, I don't want to say too hard, but it just makes it a little bit easier to do it while it's outside of the case. You have a little bit more room, things like that. Now, little rogue extender for micro USB-C. I don't know what that is. Little lanyard, little like key lanyard thing. That's cool. I'll give that to my buddy for his PC build since he paid for all the parts. He'll get all the swag too. SATA cables in the box. And this is the Wi-Fi antenna for it. Now he probably won't be running Wi-Fi, but I'll leave that in the box for him. A little jealous about that key fob though. That's pretty nice to have. But let's get this shut. Now, the M.2 screws and risers must be on the motherboard because I do need those to install it. So let's go ahead and shut this because I'm going to work right on top of this box, and I have this CPU here. I have the RAM laying on the ground down here, and I have my M.2 right here, and all this will go on the board. And I have my CPU cooler that I just put off to the side there. Now I will inspect this board just a little bit, even though it's brand new in the box. Sometimes you don't know if it's been handled before, so I'll check it just to make sure. So I'll actually put this on top of the box. You don't need that, but if there's any type of thing on it, you'll see. Now, what I'm looking for here is that everything's here, one. If there's plastic, I'm not peeling it off. I'm just going to tell him about it because he can go ahead and peel all that off because that's part of one of the things. Now, another thing to look at is, are any pins bent? Because if there's bent pins, especially on the CPU socket down here, so the CPU socket right here, if there's bent pins on that, I'm immediately going to return this motherboard and get another one, especially when you buy it brand new. But I don't see anything out of the ordinary here. This is a brand new motherboard and it looks like it's in brand new condition. So what I'm going to do is install the CPU. So let me turn it around and show you here. So I'm going to take this lever, push it down off to the side so it comes up, and lift this whole shield up like this. And then I'll put the CPU in it, close it down on top of it, and then pretty much pop it up. You just have to make sure that tab gets right underneath that screw before you push it down. And that the black piece will actually pop off when the CPU is installed. So let's go ahead and get this CPU out, and I'm gonna get it on the motherboard. And if you guys missed the parts that are in it, this is 10950K CPU. So I just have to get it out of the boxing here, and of course Intel boxing has to be very difficult. So there it is. And it does come with a little Intel i9 sticker in there, but I'm not, I'll give him the stickers. If he wants to put them on the PC, he can be my guest, but I will not stick anything on this PC because it's not mine. You never know people's styles when you're building these PCs. I mean, he told me pretty much what he wants, but personally, I don't put stickers all over my PC. Whatever's in it is in it. Now there is tabs at the bottom of the CPU down here and here, and I'll just line them up and kind of just drop it in there with the lettering down. And now that it's in there, like I said, I'm going to close this, tuck those tabs into underneath that screw, and just push down that lever and then hook it back underneath. So you can see the shield popped right off, and you can also see that the CPU is installed in there. Now I do need to get some thermal paste, and I will look inside that box to see if there is any. But first, actually, I will open this up just to see what is in the box and try and see what I need to utilize here. So I got the hardware. Two white fans. And let's get and the heat sink. So it's actually a pretty beefy CPU cooler. Hopefully inside of that box is some instructions, because I've never used this one, but it should be pretty straightforward. Now I did try and talk him into going with an AIO, but he did not want to. So I will be having to install this. So I'm going to pretty much look and see what I need here. So one of these pieces should be going onto the back plate and going around, so I can see it here. So they did supply thermal paste. They gave you a little tube, so I'll use that. And then this piece should go around the back plate. So I'm gonna pick this up, and what will happen is I will slide it through the back here, and then I'm gonna put it right back down. So this is another reason why I like building outside of the case, because that I would have to hold on one side and then screw in. Oh, one other piece. It looks like it came with a fan splitter. So that's nice, because when you plug your CPU fan in, you can split it so they both run at the same speed. So I will be using that. I was just going to run them off two different splitters and set the BIOS to match the fan speeds, but I won't need to actually in this situation. So there's also other brackets in here, which are probably for AMD fittings. They usually come with pieces so that you can put it on AMD and also Intel. So it looks like these are my Intel brackets. So this will probably go onto the cooler and mount down. So it looks like what will happen is I'll mount these onto the board like this, just face down, and then end up mounting the cooler on top of it, because let's get it out of the bag here just so I can try and show you more clearly. It looks like the cooler's going to sit down, like it should sit like this, and then I'll bolt these in. So I may have to actually install my RAM before the fan. So I want like the bar up top, so sit it like that. And I want to make sure that the CPU cooler is going to make contact, because if it looks like it's going to, so we should be in business. So For some reason, it wasn't the LGA 1200, even though it's a 1200 board, which is really strange to me, being as a 1200 board. But if it's working, it's working. So what I'm going to do is put the other 4 screws into it, because it wasn't what it was. But I'll put those screws in it and pretty much just have it set from there. So let's loosely put them in so I can line the cooler up. But as long as it's fitting and I'm making the contact, like I said, with the CPU, it doesn't really matter. It is rated for this board. I checked when I was buying it. You can check and make sure it's rated. Like I said, I got the AM4 bracket also if I wanted to use this. Now, being that this is a semi-white build, it was tough to find a cooler. But Thermalright actually had pretty good reviews from what I saw. So I'm going to stick with it and pretty much hope that it does good. Now I'll do some temp testing before I give my buddy the computer just to make sure. But right now, since I have the cooler pretty much ready to go, I just have to drop it on and screw it down. I'm going to install the RAM first. So we can see it's cool. And remember, when you're installing it, they do come with a sticker on the bottom here. You want to make sure you peel that sticker off before you put it on. If you don't, you're going to have heat issues and you're never going to be able to figure it out. So the CPU, the cooler, and the bracket, well, not the cooler, the bracket for the cooler is on. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to install the RAM chips. I'm going to install all 4 of them because it's getting to the point where I can almost get it into the case. Now, these are fairly simple. It's just a little bit of pressure and you can pretty much pop them in place. So, did get RGB stripped RAM, as you can see, and as I talked about in the other videos. Now I'm just pushing these tabs down. Sometimes it's on both sides, but this one's on one. And then I'm going to line it up and pop it in. And sometimes they take a little bit of pressure, and I heard that one click, so that one is good. Now there is a RAM order, and you can check your motherboard manual for that when you're running it. But since I'm running all 4 sticks, I'm just putting them in because I don't need to put them in the proper slots. And it's usually the furthest away from the motherboard is on it, and it's also labeled on there. Now, empty boxes I'm just going to put off to the side for now, just to keep them out of my way, and get my other 2 sticks of RAM so that I can put it in here, and hopefully after this get the CPU cooler on. Then I do have to install the M.2, and that can be a little bit of a pain in some instances. I have had motherboards, especially Asus ones, that like to Loctite their M.2 slots. So hopefully this isn't one of them, and that's pretty much why I have my precision set. That's all I really need it for is for that M.2 slot. Now, I got it right the first time. Now, get this last stick in. Now it wants to fight me a little bit. It's the top slot wasn't in. And we're in. Now I can double check this because I'm going to double check the pins, but they're snapped in there. So all 4 RAM chips are in. Now this build so far is looking pretty good. Now, I think the fan is going to just clear that. I think my fan is just going to clear that. Ooh, it may not clear it actually, which is fine. I'll figure it out. I think I'm going to go this way anyway, so it's cool. And they have these like brackets to put the fans on. They're the cooler, but right now what I want to do is I'm going to take this off because we want to get contact to it. And I'm going to take this tube. So right now, this is how our motherboard's sitting. All 4 sticks of RAM and the CPU installed. Now I'm going to take this tube, and I use a pea-sized dot method. Some other people will spread it on, but this seems to work pretty well for me, and I haven't had issues with it. So a little more than a pea size, and I'll hold this because usually when you get a tube, it's good for a couple of applications. And now I'm going to put that on there, get my screwdriver and try and hook into the screw. Now I'm lightly doing one side, and then I'm going to go over to the other side and make sure that one catches. I don't like to just tighten one side down completely without at least catching both sides. So these are spring loaded, so I'll tighten these down pretty much till I can't spin. I'm not going to crank the crap out of them. I'm just going to tighten them down till pretty much it's not easily spinnable anymore, and then the spring's going to keep the pressure on it. So my cooler is in now. Before I put the fans on my cooler, what I want to do is get my M.2 and put this on. So we're pretty close to having this build, not complete, but to a point where we do think it may be okay. Now I think I'm going to use the top M.2 slot. Now I am going to peel a little bit of plastic off here. Now I may just peel all of the plastic off of the case, or of the motherboard I mean, but let's see. So I have, it looks like, let's pick this motherboard up. So it looks like I have 3 M.2 slots on this board. It is a little heavy, so I have one here, here, and here. So I think I'm going to use this one just for this purpose. Now let's get this out of the box here since it's almost there. So you can see how tiny this is. Now not only are these faster, and that's why I like to use them, but these require 0 cabling. So that's another reason I like to use them. I do like to get modular power supplies on my builds and pretty much run as least amount of cabling as I can. So you get the speed of it, and you also get the no cabling, so a cleaner look. So I'll have cables going to my CPU power and my 24 pin and my GPU, and that's all you'll really see. So let me try and pick this up so you can see. So I took the 2 Phillips screws out, and there's just a tiny blue film over it. So I'll take that off and I'll install the M.2. And they just kind of just go in on an angle and slip in there, and then you press them down. So I also will need to take off not only the film, if I can get it. All right, there's the film. All right, the film is off, and I did break the screw loose, and now it's just pretty much installing the M.2. And like I said, this one has the slot on this side, where some have it on kind of like the other side. So what I will do is, once I get the M.2 out, I will just slide it in on like an angle like this, and then press it in. And then once it's in, you'll kind of feel it, and you'll just press it down, and then that's when the screw will go in. So it's kind of pressed down right now, so I will get my precision and screw it in so that it doesn't pop up, and then I will put the heat sink over it, which is essentially all that this is a heat sink, and there is a film on the back of that, which I will have to peel off so that it makes contact with it and it cools the M.2. Now, usually I do a fairly good job. I have heard of one instance in my PC building days where they had to take the heatsink off of the M.2 to actually keep it cooler, which is odd to me, but it was also an open air case and not a closed one like this where it'll be getting airflow through it. So now I will just place this back onto the motherboard and screw that on. And I won't crank too tight on one side until I get the other one going, and then I'll get it going. So now that that is on, we are good. So now the last thing really to do is get the fans put on. Now I will install this splitter. Now if you do not connect your fan, it could possibly throw an error code. So if you're getting an error code, it'll tell you that your CPU fan is not connected. So we'll plug this splitter in, and I will be running my fans off of it. So that's in. Now this is something that I was toying with going with air, because I would have liked kinda to be on this side, but then it's gonna block all his RGB RAM. So I'm just gonna slide this one into the middle and then the other one onto the other side. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that installed right now. Now I do like to look at my fans and see, I think it's just gonna be a much cleaner look this way. Now he's not gonna be heavily overclocking. I'm probably just gonna set the board up to do it based on the cooling that it senses. Just to give him a little bit more performance. So I'm not gonna go too crazy with this. So I'm just gonna set this up and pretty much let it run it for him. He's not too into where he's gonna be crazy overclocking it like I would. So I'll go ahead and finish getting this installed and get these fans on using these little brackets that it came with. They just hook onto the fans and then they hook around the cooler. So let me get them put on. The cooler is fully put together. M.2 is on, and that's pretty much our rig. Now I'll get the fans connected here in a second, and then I'm gonna tuck, if you see, you can probably see I'm gonna tuck it underneath that heatsink there just for safekeeping. The IO shield's already on this motherboard, so that's sitting there. So I'll peel the plastic off of that and get that installed. Now these clips hooked into the fans in the holes and then just kind of clipped to the side of the cooler. So it is on a pull method on both sides, so it's going to be okay. It's going to kind of pull air through it, but I'm going to have air blasting in the front of the case, up the bottom, and exhausting out the top. So should be plenty of airflow through this case to help keep this CPU cold. So I'm going to get that get this finished plugging these in. Now like I said, if you do not plug your fans in to the CPU fan at least, then you are going to get an error message for you'll get an error message saying that your CPU fan is not connected and your computer will not post if that's the case. So I had the splitter kind of stuck underneath there for a second. So I'm plugging both fans into the same splitter here. Now I do plan on keeping these ties on it because it keeps for a cleaner look. I'm probably gonna have to remove them. One of them can possibly stay, but I might have to tuck this back behind the case. We'll see once I get it installed, but I do have to start taking this case apart and getting it ready. Now there is 2 SSD drives on the bottom that I'm going to be removing because I don't want them, I'm not going to use them, so I'll just leave them in the box in case he ever decides to put an SSD in there and he can use it there. But I have to get it installed in the case and then install case fans, and then this build is pretty much done at that point. So let me get this case torn down. I'm going to tear it down off camera because this can be a little bit of a nuisance. Granted, I have not built in this case before and I have not looked at any instructions on how to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and take the screws out and open it up, get the glass taken off, and then we'll get the motherboard put in. The case is torn out as much as I think I need it to be. It was pretty straightforward. I mean, most cases are. There's a couple screws on the back side here, and then this top piece slid back, the glass slid up, and then the back panel slid up. Now, all the hardware is right where I thought it would be, inside the hard drive cage, which is located right here. This black piece is the hard drive cage, so it was just right there. Now, this does come with a bunch of screws and stuff. Pretty decent instructions, actually. I've never seen some packaged so well. And this will explain to you exactly how to install in the PC, tear it down whatsoever. But I'm not putting hard drives in, so I don't pretty much need this. Now this, I don't know exactly what this is, but I'll have to find out. So here we go. I will be working with this case. Now the first order of business is to get the motherboard in, and then we'll get the power supply in, which will sit in the back side here. My power supply will sit right here. Now I do have a white one, so I'll be pulling cables out. You can kind of see like through here and up top here. So I'll be pulling some cables that way. And like I said, I'm installing fans down here, so these can actually come out. And I will save these parts in case he wants to install an SSD, but I don't think he will. If anything, I'd probably install another M.2 into this. But we'll save these just in case that comes up later on down the road. And I am notorious for dropping screws everywhere, but I will find those and make sure they're with the PC. But let's go ahead. I'm going to lay this down. I always lay it down. I do motherboards. Now, I have it on a mouse pad, but let's go ahead, peel this plastic off because we don't want the plastic on it. The case plastic I'm going to leave on it for him to peel off, because that is pretty much what a lot of people like to do as far as when they have a new build, is peel plastic off of the case. But the internal stuff, I'm taking it off because it's harder to get to. Now I will need case screws. Now one good thing about this case is that the standoffs are already built in, so that is always a help. Now what I want to do is get it into the case and line my motherboard up with, there we go, and we're in. So I pretty much lined that back plate up with what I thought I needed. Now this case has so much room in it. It's pretty nice. Now what I'll do is I'll take a couple standoff screws and I will put them in, and you don't have to go crazy tight, but there's a few that are going to be a little bit trickier. So let's go ahead. And I like to go in different patterns to try and seat the motherboard properly. If you just go on one side, it's not going to get seated too well. Or it could be not seated properly and you have trouble with other screws. The case is fully stripped down now. I did take the front piece off, but the motherboard is in. It's all screwed in. I mean, it's looking pretty sick already. So my next thing I'm going to do is, I think, run all the cabling and wires for the front I/O panel. So I have some pieces that will go in as far as for USB, things like that. So USB 3.0, which is on probably the side, so I'll have to pull that out. My wiring for the buttons on the front as far as starts, powering up, reset, and lighting. And then my HD audio, which is probably back here. usually, so I'll run that there. Now I'm gonna get these plugged in, and you can usually just look and see, and it's all usually fairly labeled well. So the biggest pain is the power buttons. They tend to be a little bit harder to put in, but if I lay this case down, I should be able to get my HD audio in place here. And as far as cutouts are concerned, this case has been pretty well designed for running all these cables. So if you look at the motherboard, all the stuff for these wires I'm running now is labeled also. So I'm just trying to get it all plugged in. So my reset switch, lastly my power button. So I should have LEDs and I should have power and reset ran now. Now I need to run my U32 cable through here, which is actually, this is probably the first motherboard I ran this for. I haven't had that on motherboards before, and my USB 3.0. So I will plug that in, and this. So I'll plug my, I'll plug my U32 in first, which is right here, this one, and it's right below the 24 pin, and then my 3.0 USB is right below that. So let me get those plugged in here so that it's ready to go. And pretty much what you're gonna do is, they plug in fairly simply. You just gotta line the tabs up and they'll go in. And they're in. So now that that's all put together, I'm gonna move on to my power supply. And I did pull the case bolts already before I put them away when I was off camera. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna get the power supply out. Now this is a cable. It does come with screws to mount it, but I usually just use the ones that come with the case. Some manuals that I don't really need. And then the power supply. So this is obviously brand new. This whole build is brand new. So I can take this little sticker off for the warnings. So what I want to do is get the cabling out, and it comes in a nice little bag here. And I'm gonna put this off to the side to give me some room here to work. Now I like to see what I need. So I know I don't need this. PCIe I do need, which this one is the exact one that I need. And I do need CPU power, so I actually need 2 CPU. So here's one 4-pin. And here's the other one that I need. So I know I need that. And then my 24-pin, which is right here. Now that is all that I should need. And I did go with this power supply because it's white. It's going to look ridiculous in this PC. It's going to be really nice. So 24-pin. So I'm going to plug it into my power supply. Now what I'm going to do is plug all the ones that I need into my power supply. And I don't need any SATA that I know of. So I can put that off to the side. Now I may need SATA for my fans, but I'll get there when I get there, because I do have it might have a hub that I need to power, in which case I'll just kind of have to reach in there and plug in, which in this case there's a lot of room in the back. In my case it's a little harder, it's really tight, but it is what it is at that point. Now PCIe, Now these won't plug into really anywhere that they're not supposed to be, so it's pretty tough to mess it up. And a lot of power supplies nowadays, they'll actually run a second PCIe and CPU pin on the same port, so you can actually run more power to the GPU if you need to off of it, or more power to the motherboard for the CPU. I've noticed that becoming more of a trend since I've been building. So now that I have the cabling that I will need hooked up, I will mount my power supply, and what I will look at is the holes here, 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 and here, and I will just line them up. So it's going to sit this way with the fan pointing out, and I will just kind of wiggle it into place there. So I moved the wires out of the way that I needed to, so now I can just start tightening some screws into the power supply and just get this mounted into the case. It was a couple case wires for the HD audio, and it looked like it was actually the 3.0 USB. Looked like it had a pretty long wire that was actually interfering in my way a little bit. So get this built and get this threaded in. Now I do like to tighten, obviously, right away. I like to get all 4 screws in, and then I'll tighten them all. That way I know I have a proper seating on my power supply. Now it's just getting all this cabling ran the way I want. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this off camera, route all the cabling, route my CPU power through here, my 24 pin you see, and then I'll probably have my GPU powers out of here and just wrap up to it. So I'm gonna do that off camera, and I will be right back. I'm gonna clean this up a little. Majority of my wiring is ran now, as you can see. CPU power is connected, 24 pins connected. My CPU fans are connected. Now what I'm going to do is next install these case fans before I do the GPU, but I'm going to do this off camera because I'll have to move around a lot. But this is my next step, so I'm going to open this up. So before I go ahead and get all these fans put in, I mean, those aren't actually screwed in the front. I'm going to show you guys how this fan system works, because looking at it, you're wondering, it's your first time installing Leon Leaf fans like it is mine. You're wondering why there's no splitters, this and that, and it's saying you can control up to 4 fans on one port. Now I will have to, like I said, run a SATA power to this to power it up, and then it'll run to my USB when I finally install it. But you can run 4 fans per port, and you're wondering how it works. So one of these little fobs actually goes to the fan, and it's going to hook onto here. There's pins, and you're just going to pretty much hook it on like that and slide it in. Now the other fans aren't going to use this little fob, so this is going to run and control this fan and the RGB. So what you're going to do is unwrap the fan, and on the other side there's this little thing. It's going to read, and so I'm going to slide this side with the pins on it onto this other side. So I'm going to flip the fan around, kind of hook it in, and then they latch together. So that's how I'm going to get 3 groups of 3 fans onto this motherboard. I was looking at it for a second saying, oh man, I need to order splitters. Now I'm not going to be able to finish it today, but I was wrong. So I'm just going to slide this in and hook it. So this one is going to go across the bottom here, and I'll lay it this way. Or maybe I'll just lay it this way like I had it before. I might spin it back the other way and run the black wiring across, and that's how I'm going to run it. And then I'll mount the fan, so I'll have the intakes the bottom, intakes the front, exhaust out the top. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to get these all mounted in. It was pretty straightforward, 4 screws per fan, and get it mounted, and be right back. Alright, fans are all installed as you can see, and there's just one last piece left to this puzzle, and that's putting the GPU in, and I do have it right here. So let's get this bad boy unboxed. Now this is the RTX 3070 Ti from Gigabyte. So this is one nice GPU. Now I do have one of these in a 3070, so I have had some experience with it. And it does come with a cool case decal badge, which I will leave in the box for him. Like I said, I don't like to put stickers all over builds that I make for people because not everyone likes stickers. Like me personally, I don't like all the stickers all over it. But I'm going to get this GPU installed. Now this, we will see, takes up, it looks like just 2 bays on the frame here. So this GPU, and I'm sorry for the loud crackling, is a tank, but it only takes up 2 GPUs. This thing is a beast. Look at that thing. Absolute monster. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna take a couple screws out here. I gotta take these screws out. Now I do like cases like this where you don't snap these out, they just come out. I have had cheaper low-end cases where they just snap out, and once you take them out, they're pretty much done unless you buy a third-party piece for it. And now anyone that hasn't installed a GPU, I'm going to slide it right into that, right into the slide. I'm going to push this little tab back and slide it in. So I'm going to actually lay this one flat because it does need a lot of support. So I'm gonna lay this down flat and go ahead and reach through it and take that off because that doesn't need to be there. That's in, so it's laying flat on it. And put these screws back in to help secure this bad boy in place. So this will just help secure this GPU in place because it is a tank. Now this is the like I said, the 3070 Ti. My 3070 is not quite as big as this one, but that's downstairs on a mining rig since it's not LHR. But this thing is a beast. So there it is. Absolute beast inside there. Now I do have a GPU support bracket that I may give him. We'll see. But I'm going to run the power to this and then we'll get it turned on. I'm going to run the power, close up the case. I do need to run another power cord, so let's see. And I do have one. Now I may look and see if I just have a single one. Sometimes they do come with ones that don't run 2 strands, they just run single, but this one looks like it runs 2. That one runs 2. So it looks like that's all I have. So I'm gonna run this, get the power hooked up, and then we'll get this thing fired up. I'll get all the glass back on it. It's all together. I got the GPU in, the fans are all in now. I got power to it. There is a little bit of GPU sag, as you can see down here. I like to lift that up, but it's not too bad. I may give him a bracket, we'll see. But here we go. Let's get it turned on, and there we go. I mean, the LCD screen on the front of it is a pretty nice touch from Gigabyte, but I'm just gonna get the glass back on it, and pretty much, I mean, this is such a killer looking build. You know, I got the RAM's not covered by the cooler too much, so that's pretty sweet. The lighting is badass on the fans. I mean, this is definitely a cool build, one of my nicer ones. Now I'm not too fond on how this is ran, but I mean, with this size of a GPU, it was hard for me to run it under, so I just went over it a little bit, but still pretty clean. I'll be sending him pictures of this build and hoping he likes it. But I mean, for the most part, pretty happy with this case, how this build turned out. Just got to get the glass back on it, but it's definitely a killer looking build. He's going to be ripping games left and right. So the only thing I need to do is maybe address that GPU sag a little bit. It is a heavy GPU, but it is bolted in, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue. It's just transporting it to his house. After that, it'll be pretty stationary. But, you know, thanks for checking this video out on this build. I'm happy to get this build finally complete. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You know, if you like the shirts I'm wearing in my videos, they're in the description below. Check out the store. But see you next time.